Hello, everybody. It's Chris Frew here with BioBuzz for our next episode of What's the Buzz? Today, I'm excited to welcome Roy Zwahlen from Eshelman Innovation. Roy, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Chris, for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So Roy is a Chief Strategy Officer at Eshelman Innovation and Associate Dean for Strategic Partnerships and Risk Management at UNC Eshelman School of Pharmacy. You got a lot of titles.
Yeah, the joke in academia is that it's a pie eating contest and the award is more pies. So that's how titles get added over time. You stay a place long enough, it's a cumulative effect.
Well, today's topic is on designing the next innovation ecosystem, and Roy has been hands-on and sleeves rolled up on different innovation ecosystems and initiatives all throughout your career. So looking forward to diving in a little bit here, Roy. Before we jump in, for those of you who are joining today, What's the Buzz is our live podcast we do with ecosystem builders. So people who are working to build the programs and the platforms and the systems and invest in the companies that are growing in the life sciences space all across the country. So excited to dive into today's conversation. Before we do, I want to give a special thank you to our sponsor, who is our annual sponsor for this program all year long, Heffron and Company. Heffron and Company and BioBuzz are good, strong partners. They're a 104-year-old mechanical and construction company based here in Rockville, Maryland. They've been tied to some of the most iconic laboratories and facilities like Human Genome Sciences and AstraZeneca and some of the major projects. I would say you drive down 270, you're not going to see their sign on every building, but their impact has been felt on every building you see almost. So I really want to thank them for their support for BioBuzz and the whole ecosystem. They do a lot behind the scenes to make sure the patients that we all serve are taken care of safely with really good new innovative medicine. So I appreciate Colin and the whole team over there at Heffron. So Roy, let's dive in for everybody here. Why don't we start off? Can you just start off telling everybody a little bit more about you and your career and your background?
Sure. So I always like to start that I'm a reformed attorney. Sorry to all the lawyers out there. I'm a proud attorney, I should say, by training. That's how I started. I quickly moved over to the business side of the house. A lot of my early career was with the Biotechnology Innovation Organization. So I was doing a lot of think tank activity with them, really looking at university industry, startups, venture capital, in the earliest stages of the life science ecosystem across biopharma, bioag, and then biofuels, and what were the models, the ecosystem models around the world, what was best practice, what was emerging in that early stage, in that early space, and really sharing that information with national leaders, state and local leaders, and even international leaders that were trying to understand how to leverage their basic research and try to move that forward. And what was the ecosystem that you had to design around that research to really enable it and move it forward to create the jobs and the exports and the tax base that the governments and other organizations that are trying to support that create. And so that was really how I got started, and I fell in love with the space and working across, again, academia, venture, startups, and then got the opportunity to come down here to North Carolina. This was 10 years ago now, so I've been here at UNC for a little while, and to really help build out Eshelman Innovation. Eshelman Innovation is a $100 million gift that was given from the founder of PPD. For those that may know the Eshelman name, it was the largest gift to UNC at the time, and there was kind of two focus areas for us. One was get research out of the university, so do all the ecosystem things and provide direct technology development grants and other kinds of support, work with external partners, industry, venture capital, build that ecosystem around UNC and the School of Pharmacy, which is where it lists. So it has a focus around therapeutics and digital health. So we are healthcare focused generally, but those are our two primary areas. We do a little bit of medical devices, but therapeutics and digital health is our bread and butter. And the last piece, which is kind of the fun part, depending on your perspective, is he did not endow it. So as typical of university gifts, they come in endowments, so you have a perpetual revenue stream. By design, he wanted us to think differently, to invest in projects, to think about, to think like venture capital, think like foundations that are doing impact investments, think like biotechs, and what can we do to create value and then also ultimately capture some of that value to sustain ourselves long term. So we have this impact mission of impacting human health and patients, but it's fueled by our ability to be successful in the commercial marketplace.
That's great. Well, I mean, I think the coffers always run out anywhere. So the fact that you have to every day think about sustainability and the right investment probably sharpens the team and kind of how you approach things. So how do you look at kind of the assets coming out of UNC? You mentioned therapeutics and digital health, but how do you look at it through that lens? And what are some of the kind of initiatives or structures you've built to kind of emulate that kind of VC or venture philanthropy model?
Yeah, I'll start on the therapeutic side. So we have a therapeutic accelerator, and we have 3 cones. One is portfolio, which for all of you in biotech will be very familiar with. So we try to bring that portfolio level thinking into UNC, and and we're creating the portfolio. So we are taking that money, taking early stage projects, getting them to proof of concept in vivo, and some mouse data, not quite tox, so it's still pretty early stuff, but we're moving them significantly down the line and really trying to bring that venture biotech view and having clear kill criteria, moving across milestones, et cetera. So it's not an academic grant or an NIH grant exercise. It is very much a industry-oriented early stage fund. The second cone is infrastructure. And the way we think about infrastructure is what's going to accelerate and enable relevant drug discovery projects. So that's everything from bringing in additional donations to build a CRISPR core, a target validation core, to really get us the best novel targets that could potentially be out there, utilize the expertise of our faculty and go after those unexplored targets that nobody's looking at, right? I think those that are familiar understand that people tend to all look at the same targets, right? And try to work on similar targets. And that's a deliberate choice on our part through the CRISPR core and through some other infrastructure we've supported over time to really get into deep novel spaces, right? That have high potential on the back end. But it also includes things like industry partnerships around our infrastructure. We don't try to rebuild everything here. So whether it's a DNA encoded library with a partnership with HitGen or antibody partnerships, and you'll see this across the country in therapeutics accelerators where they're really trying to do a lot of that science where you need the independent validation external to the university. We have that motion as well. And then I think the third cone is talent, right? As universities, it's a natural place to be. We're a bit different because we tend to start with technology and then think about talent because we are trying to get that return, right? So we are thinking more like biotech, but talent is is the bread and butter of any university. And we build programs that leverage the I-Core programs and leverage other things that are out there, but really provide that safety net for postdocs that are transitioning out. They don't want to go be an academician. They're not quite ready to go into industry. They didn't get quite far enough on their tech that they wanted to, or their therapeutic or whatever it might be. And they just need a year or two and some development funds and almost in a junior faculty position to provide that stability to really accelerate and be successful. So there we're actually really thinking about the innovator and what are the barriers that we can remove and the accelerant that we can provide to move them forward. I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, that's very strategic. I'm curious, Roy. $100 million sounds like a lot, but in therapeutics, you can burn through that pretty quick. So you're based on these 3 pillars you have. I'm assuming this is probably in the infrastructure layer, but where's the VC community sit in terms of the partnerships you have? And I'm just curious, how are you fostering those relationships both locally? What's it like there? What are the investors in North Carolina like? And do they see this does it de-risk? I mean, do you see favorable engagement around it? What's that relationship like?
Yeah, great question. We've got a lot of great venture capital firms here. We don't have enough. I think every ecosystem outside of Boston, San Francisco would probably share that sentiment with me, right? That we could always use more. But we have good, solid venture capital firms here. They tend to be later stage. By later stage, I mean in our areas, it's post revenue for digital health or other kinds of application or med device, or really post SBIR, STTR phase 2, right? Or later even. And so, and as every university knows, that's a long road and there's a lot of things that kind of die on the vine. And where our funding sits is that it really does come in a little bit before SBIR, because not a lot of things are SBIR ready yet, and it kind of goes through part of SBIR. And again, the goal is to accelerate. So SBIR is a great process as long as you can wait and the faculty member can manage it, and you can find external talent to help run it, all of those things that your community knows well. So as a result, they are as kind of standard venture capital. You get a lot more creative capital in the Bay Area, in Boston, people that are willing to take risks or create novel approaches to earlier stage things that de-risk it for investors, but also help kind of universities move things forward. So we're just stumbling on those now that are more in a national frame. And Eshelman Innovation presents an interesting opportunity because we're not capital strapped per se. We will obviously over time run out of money if we're not successful, but it is this, how can we leverage the capital that we're fortunate enough to have to get venture capital to think differently. And that's in this current environment with venture capital and where they are, that's a bit of a challenge, right, for all venture capital. But we're starting to see some progress about some firms that are outside the state that we're getting connected to, that are willing to go outside of their own locales. They're in other non-Boston, San Francisco regions, so they already have to think creatively just to stay alive. So we're really starting to be able to innovate ourselves around what those early partnerships can look like.
I hear a lot. You mentioned kind of the Bay Area and Boston. I hear a lot that about this concept of big bets, right? These are markets where people take big bets on novel things, and kind of the ecosystem is built around that, right? It sounds like at Eshelman you are targeting novel things, right? So you're not trying to kind of follow just the crowd. You are trying to take bigger bets. So what do you think you need to do to really kind of codify that next phase and really kind of attract and kind of build that brand that these big bets will pay off and these big bets are worth investing in? Because it sounds like that sounds like that's part of the model.
Yeah, the best metrics, and we're getting there now, but the best metrics is how do you demonstrate that you've de-risked an asset, and how do you demonstrate that you've accelerated an asset, right? Those are two interesting questions in and of themselves that we think a lot about. But ultimately, it's going to first be, are you successful in raising, throughout the rounds? And our best example of that is actually in the digital health side, where a company called Goldie Health, through our venture studio model, which we can talk about, was something that we co-created with partner Alloy investor of another VC, kind of venture studio firm in Indiana, helped us stand up. And we helped to create the company. In the venture studio model, you're providing both the capital, you're recruiting in management, and you're building the company all in one motion. So it's not an accelerator, it's not a VC firm, it's probably a combination of the two. And in that model, it's a problem actually out of Western North Carolina, in the middle of the opioid epidemic. There's these community health workers that are going around trying to get patients that have use disorders into treatment, but they have zero IT infrastructure, right? They're doing it on clipboards. And so the innovation was this company that created that digital infrastructure for them to really accelerate that. And they've gone beyond North Carolina now. It's actually to Baltimore. They're in your region working with Johns Hopkins. And the infrastructure, they're working with emergency departments, and emergency departments are missing about 13 out of 15 patients that come in with an overdose. They're missing and not able to get them into primary care and telehealth services. They've actually flipped that, and they're Goldie is capturing 14 out of 15 patients. And so big step change. And that's, something that wouldn't, it's a, it is a kind of, it was a big bet when early on. It's something very different. People weren't really looking at the space at the time. And now they've become this patient acquisition company because they've got more patients on platform than all the telehealth unicorns do. And they can do it for much cheaper. So those are just examples of the kinds of metrics that we have to look at and start to tell the story of, okay, it wasn't what we expected, but wow, by being in this innovative space and then working through the process of positioning them towards the right market, all of a sudden, they're looking like a better unicorn than some of the telehealth unicorns, even though it's a opioid use disorder IT infrastructure, right? Not something you'd expect. And their fundraising rounds, the initial rounds, going back to Capital, North Carolina, we had to do the first investment. The seed round, they couldn't get capital in North Carolina. They had to go out to Silicon Slopes in Utah. They took that risk, and now they're in Series A. And the Silicon Slopes Frame Capital is taking quite a bit of that round, and they're oversubscribed. And the timeline between that first pre-seed and where we are now is about 2 years now. So that's what we're trying. That's the acceleration piece. But it becomes start, because what do you compare it against, right? Mm-hmm. How do you talk about the benchmarks? Because it's not apples to oranges, as every kind of ecosystem person knows, right? This is always the challenge in telling the story and telling your impact. Yeah, is trying to pull out a success and then point all along the way where your intervention really caused things to change.
Yeah, which is hard to do, right? As complex as these deals are. Well, let's expand out a little bit to the ecosystem. You study ecosystems globally, right? For many years at Bio, this is what you mentioned you were doing. What's your take on North Carolina as an ecosystem, in the health space and life sciences?
Right. So there was a recent study a few years ago where, we were ranked as North Carolina from a research perspective. We were ranked second in the nation based on NIH, NSF dollars, et cetera. But we were ranked 22nd in innovation. So North Carolina has this interesting disconnect and really opportunity that we felt here, where there's a lot of great research. Where we're struggling with is the rest of the ecosystem, right? And how do we translate that into products and companies and venture capital, et cetera. So we certainly are a much more mature ecosystem than most. And so I think many people would be very jealous by what we have in North Carolina as far as venture capital and other, wet lab space and other kinds of things. But, I think overall, I'd have to look again, but depending on what you're looking at from an innovation ecosystem, we're, top 10, maybe top 15, depending, maybe sometimes top 5, depending on what you're looking like. But, it wasn't that long ago, 20 years ago, where RTP was, it was Boston, San Francisco, RTP, right? That was the statement. And I think what has happened is a lot of other ecosystems, including your backyard, Chris, have really stepped up. And there's been a lot of investment by the state, by the region, by the different players, where, everybody's caught up with North Carolina. And I think surpassed North Carolina in certain domains. So the opportunity is still there. I think there's plenty of substrate to capture. It's just, we have to think differently than we have for the last 20 years, or as actually Albert Einstein said, like, something along the lines of what got us here is not what's going to get us to the next space we need to be, right? So we've got to innovate our own ecosystem to really move things forward.
Yeah. And when you think about, again, maybe that next fresh look at doing things differently, where do you see the opportunities? Where do you see that there's, a place to move the needle? Because again, you mentioned, it's being in a top 10 innovation ecosystem is not a bad place to be, right? And from a overall life science space, I mean, I think you guys are 11 or 12 billion in capital infrastructure for like manufacturing and big pharma. So there's a robust ecosystem here. But what I'm hearing is it's that earlier innovation phase that needs built. So where do you see the gaps, and what needs to be done differently in kind of just in your purview?
Yeah, and I think even just before getting to the gaps, I think there's growing strength with in the broader IT software space, with many large companies locating here. So I expect there to be a lot of kind of natural innovation that flows from that. We have organizations like NC Innovation, which were stood up by the state, that's trying to do technology development grants and some programming in the outer edges of our state, outside of RTP, to bring and fully capture the value of the early, the ideation or the substrate, if you will. So I think we're going in good directions right now. The gaps, though, that remain is we do think manufacturing first as a state, which is not a bad thing. There's lots of good reasons from an economic development perspective to do that, and large partnering and bringing in the Amazons, the Apples, et cetera. That makes sense and has a lot of near-term benefits. What we're probably missing, and I think NC Innovation is an acknowledgement of this, is that those early stage ideas and startups, that if you can keep them in your state, which is a big challenge, really provide the massive growth and the knock-on effects across your ecosystem, right? The rewards back to venture capital that are local, the explosive job growth, all the know-how that comes with that. And then as good ecosystems see that those companies being there, that feeds back into the educational pipeline with the universities. It drives the next wave of research because it's more problem-oriented rather than just broader discovery-oriented. So this classic Porter ecosystem models that we're all trying to build, that early stage isn't developed quite enough to really drive the whole funnel. We're having to do M&A, if you will, right, to bring things in, when in reality, we have a lot of stuff here. We just need to cultivate better.
Yeah. I'm going to bring up a topic too that's been in the news a lot, and I've been part of a couple of the road shows that the National Council for Innovation in Biotech has been doing. It's a Senate-funded commission. Part of it is how we're losing ground to China, right? So China, from as an innovator, is really up the game. We know that their focus is biotechnology right now. In all your studies and looking around, and understanding how ecosystems work across the U.S., where do you see us in terms of that race, and what do you think needs to be done, or what do you think what's the message? I guess I don't think what needs to be done, but what's the message for how we can, better compete?
Yeah, it's the China story is such a fascinating story, and I've done a little bit of work in the region, and I keep hearing this phrase recently around, let 1,000 flowers bloom, which those political scientists, which was my undergrad, understand that was the Chairman Mao saying, right? And ironically, China, from their innovation perspective, has become very strategic, right? They are placing bets in the spaces that they want to be strong, whether it's semiconductors or other areas. How much of that is hype and how much of it is real? There's a lot of debate around that, but certainly if you look at life science patenting and other kinds of things, and the licensing and the venture deals that are happening in China right now, it's paying off, right? They're seeing big jumps in the life science space, as you point out. I think sometimes as the U.S., we still have 1,000 flowers bloom mentality in our strategy as an innovation strategy person, right? I'm going to obviously be biased towards thinking about strategy. I think we have a harder time placing bets at the federal level, at the state level, at the university level, and we just have to, right? I think we have to lean in on our strength. We are still strong, right? And we can still leverage that. But there's a place for doing broader, letting things kind of ideate out in the ecosystem and not being over-indexed. And a lot of the leadership literature and research and strategy research reinforces that. But there's a point in time where we have to make decisions, right? And we have to make investments. And we can't just M&A our way out of that, right? So we've got to be able to say, hey, North Carolina is strong in the following areas, or UNC, or whatever the frame is. And we want to invest and build on that strength. And that's how we stay ahead of places like China or other places, rather than us being so diffuse and potentially distracted that people with more focus and a fair amount of resources can overtake us.
Yeah. Well put. Yeah, I'm fascinated by that story as well. And as an ecosystem guy myself, just exploring and seeing what people are doing to align systems and align the journey from innovation to commercialization and take these bets. Before we wrap things up, Roy, so you not only study this innovation ecosystem field, but you're an author as well. So you released a book, Race to Innovation, and part of that talks also about something that I'm very talent and the impact talent has. Could you take some time to tell us about that book and really kind of some of what you talk about in that book around talent's impact in these innovation ecosystems?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for that question. And I'd love to. The Race to Innovation, it's about the human capital side of innovation strategy, the talent side, as you put it, Chris. And really, we go through a framework. It's at the principle level. It's meant to be high level. But the idea is that because of situations like China, because of where we are as a country, there's a lot of untapped potential and untapped talent. And we actually tell the story with several of our co-authors of the African American community and their history in innovation entrepreneurship, because it sets the scene quite well of what can be accomplished in spite of all the barriers, right? If you can innovate in, post-Civil War as an African American in the Deep South and become the first self-made female millionaire in the United States, who was actually African American female, then there's a power to innovation entrepreneurship that we hasn't fully unlocked or realized yet. And so it is, what can we learn from that community and other communities around the world ultimately? And the principles real quickly are, how do we better recognize potential? How do we actually assess human capital and talent, particularly talent that doesn't look like us, doesn't come from our same cultural background, may not have our same credentials that we have? How do we work across teams? What does that look like? The power of enclaves, understanding how community really can enable innovation, enabling what does ownership look like? How do we as startups, we get that naturally, right? Like, what does the cap table look like? But even taking that beyond startups and really thinking about how do we enable each other overall, leaning into different unique lenses that people have at the individual organizational level, that those unique backgrounds are assets, not liabilities. We tend to think about liabilities first rather than the asset side of that equation of human talent. So how do we think about how people look at things in ways that are actually quite scalable? And then how do we accelerate overall the transformative change? And so there's a lot of great stories in there I won't go into now. We don't have the time. And so it is actually, it's not a purely academic book. It's meant to be very approachable and readable. And we just tell the stories of people and how they demonstrate those principles and weave in some of the research here and there. But intentionally, it's meant to be for the general public and people that are interested in innovation strategy and entrepreneurship generally.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good approach because, I mean, if you want to inspire entrepreneurship, it's stories, right? And it's stories people can relate to. There's enough research papers and things like that, but you're going to lose the majority of people in that. So sounds like the intention was make it consumable by people that can turn it into action.
Exactly.
Well, I love that. Yeah, we're actually working on a grant right now, submitting it tomorrow in Philadelphia. And so I'll bring this up just for discussion purposes, but so we're looking at the Latino community in Philadelphia, which is very underrepresented in life sciences and the fastest growing demographic in the cities of Philadelphia. And our thesis is like, how do we codify and tap? How do we inspire? How do we show people there's a pathway and build confidence and belonging in the life science space with a pathway there? Because to your point, like that's, Philadelphia they call it Silicon Valley, right? There's this rich gene therapy element. There's a lot of manufacturing. There's a lot of pharma manufacturing up there, pharma positions, and it's a community that if you look at the numbers, doesn't participate as much as they should. Right. And I think about how many new innovations or ideas or things are missing from what we can bring to patients because that population is not as prevalent. So,
yeah, absolutely. And in the innovation space, we're very comfortable talking about these things in the language of value created. And I think, we wrote this book to be, that anybody in the general public could pick it up that's interested and be able to digest it. But I think that's language that we need right now in our current environment and where we are as a country, and quite frankly, even internationally, of how do we actually see talent as value first, right? The classic in negotiation strategy, you create value, like you expand the pie before you divide it up. Let's not skip that step. And how do we think about different communities and how they look at problems of, diabetes or cardiovascular care or other kinds of things that they experience in really unique ways. And that unique lens is that is the technology, that is the startup opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. That is a different way of looking at a problem that's not just relevant for the Latin community or the African-American community, but could be a better solution for everybody with diabetes or everybody with cardiovascular issues. Mm-hmm. And we're just missing that entire innovation subset because we're not bringing those people into the funnel. So Congratulations on what you're doing. Best of luck on getting that grant. It sounds very exciting.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. I mean, those are the labors of love, right? BioBuzz is built around a little bit different model, but I can't help to try to take swings at some of these things we see. We are a community first organization, right? We believe and have always been built around the power of many. I call it hierarchy over hierarchy. So when things like that come up, and it came up natural. There's a Latino Philadelphia resident who started a laboratory services company, and he's like, how do we do this more? So we partnered up, and so we'll see. But I to your point, I mean, that's where talent can move the needle. And if we combine that with the systems that you're creating at Eshelman and the systems that are out there that can take new ideas and help to kind of shepherd them along, and the right pieces are in place, I think that's where again the flywheel starts moving.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate all the discussion today, Roy. I feel like we could go another half an hour or so if we if time permitted, but maybe we can continue this hopefully in person soon. I'm coming down to North Carolina quite a bit lately, and I'd love to have you on. Maybe let's do this again next year. And let's see where Eshelman is kind of advancing to, and kind of some of these initiatives in North Carolina are moving to, if you're open to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Really enjoyed the time. Thank you so much, Chris, for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Well, thank you all for tuning in. Please join us again next week. Next week, we have another guest, someone I've known for quite a while and have always admired, Amy Adams from Northern Virginia, who is Executive Director of the new Nexus 234 Innovation District. And so we're going to get to talk about all the things that are happening in Northern Virginia, which, again, is a lot to fit into 30 minutes. So we're going to do our best. But I hope you'll join in next week for the discussion with Amy and I. And until then, thank you all for joining. Roy, thank you again for being a guest and sharing your insights. And enjoy the rest of the day.